The desert had a way of swallowing sound. Even the wind, which roared across the dunes hours ago, now whispered through cracked shrubs and bone-dry mesquite like a secret too tired to shout. Miguel's boots sank half an inch in the soft sand with every labored step, the heat warping the air into ghostly waves around him. The sun hovered like a cruel overseer in the merciless California sky, and the water in his bottle had long since turned warm, like regret. He adjusted the strap of the battered canvas bag slung over his shoulder, wincing as sweat soaked through the back of his shirt. His truck had died 3 miles behind him, an old Chevy with more rust than dignity, and he'd left it without ceremony. It wasn't the first thing that had failed him lately. Life had a checklist, and it was steadily ticking every box. Job gone. Wife gone. Savings laughable. But he still had Nico, his son. And as long as that was true, Miguel knew he'd keep walking. He crested a dune, eyes squinting against the glare, and froze. Ahead, perhaps 30 yards down the slope, a strange chaos unfolded, a small mound of sand collapsing on itself. 3 tiny figures flailed at the edges of what looked like a sinkhole, their movements frantic, voices sharp with panic. Cries floated through the air, high-pitched, terrified, unmistakably young. "Help! Please, someone! We're stuck! We can't!" Miguel didn't think. His legs moved before his brain could warn him of anything else. He dropped the bag, half ran, half slid down the slope, heart pounding as the cries grew clearer. The sand underfoot shifted treacherously, as if the earth itself couldn't decide whether to hold or let go. 2 of the girls clung to a jagged rim of hardened dirt, their faces streaked with dust and tears. The third, smaller, or maybe just more Sundays, had slipped further down and struggled against a sinking pool of fine, collapsing sand. They couldn't be more than 6 or 7. All 3 wore matching sundresses, now ripped and dirted, and their sunburned cheeks were flushed with terror. "Hold on," Miguel called out, his voice hoarse from dehydration and disbelief. "Don't move too much. I'm coming." One of them looked up, a light-haired girl with braids and bleeding knuckles. "Please, my sister. She's down there." Miguel dropped to his knees at the edge, testing the ground with careful palms. The hole wasn't deep, maybe 6 feet, but the sand was behaving like quicksand, drawing the smallest girl toward the center as she screamed. Her little hand scratched helplessly at the surface, unable to gain any purchase. "All right, sweetheart," he said gently. "You're going to be okay. I've got you." He lowered himself slowly into the hole, planting his elbows and knees wide to distribute his weight. The center trembled ominously with every shift. He reached forward, straining. His fingertips brushed hers. "Grab on." The girl's hand shot up. He seized her wrist and pulled, groaning with the effort. The sand sucked at her feet like a jealous ghost, refusing to let go. Miguel clenched his jaw and pulled harder, legs bracing against the slope. A final yank, and she came free with a gasp, sobbing into his shoulder as he backed up the incline with her in his arms. He set her gently on the rim and turned to the others. One was already sliding in after her sister, careless in her fear. "No, don't," he barked, but was too late. The second girl's foot found a weak spot. The earth gave way. Miguel dove, catching her under the arms as she shrieked. The sand roared like an angry wave and collapsed beneath them. He twisted mid-fall, taking the brunt of the drop with his back as they landed hard in the pit. Pain flashed up his spine, but he didn't let go. Dust filled his lungs. He coughed and stood, hoisting the girl up. A third rescue. His body screamed in protest. He was overheating, badly dehydrated, and there was a sick buzzing in his ears that hadn't been there 10 minutes ago. But he kept going. He carried her to the side, using his elbow to claw a stable ledge into the slope. She scrambled out, helped by her sister. Only one left, the oldest, the one with the braids. "I can do it," she said bravely as he reached for her. "Just help me jump." He extended a hand. "I'll catch you." She leaped. He caught her, barely, and their weight combined triggered another minor collapse. He turned his body again, shielding her as they landed in the newly formed trough. When they crawled out, at last, Miguel didn't have the strength to stand. He lay there on the sand beside the 3 girls, chest heaving, arms coated in blood, grit, and blisters. The heat pressed down like a lead blanket. He closed his eyes for what he thought would be just a second. Everything went silent. Selena had seen the whole thing. From where she stood, half hidden by a bent saguaro in the tinted wreck of her stalled SUV, she had watched this man emerge from nowhere, throw himself into danger, and rescue her daughters without hesitation. Her phone had no signal. Her security detail had taken a wrong turn hours earlier when her satellite GPS glitched, and she told them she could manage. She wanted space. A mistake. She had run back from the ridge after trying and failing to get a signal. When she returned, the girls were already near the sinkhole. She was seconds too late. Then he arrived. She hadn't moved, afraid any sudden sound would break the spell. Something about the way he moved, determined and unflinching, had pinned her to the spot. Now, he lay in the sand, unmoving. Her daughters huddled beside him, whispering and touching his face with trembling fingers. One of them, Emily, began to cry. That broke the spell. Selena rushed down the slope. She was abandoned long ago, her silk dress now torn and streaked with sweat and dust. She dropped to her knees beside the stranger, checking for breath. His chest rose and fell shallowly. Alive, but barely. Water, she said aloud, then fumbled in the side compartment of her SUV, dragging over an emergency bottle. She knelt beside him and tilted the water to his cracked lips. He stirred, coughed, then blinked in confusion. "You're okay," she said softly. "You saved them. You're okay." He tried to sit, failed, then looked at her with eyes shadowed by fatigue and disbelief. "Are they safe?" "All three," she whispered. "Because of you." The smallest one clambered onto his side and hugged his chest. Selena felt a lump rise in her throat that she hadn't experienced in years. Not during mergers, lawsuits, or even childbirth. This was different. It was raw and real and terrifying. He was just a man. Dirty. Broken. With no apparent resources or reason to help. But he had. "Who are you?" she asked, stunned. He smiled faintly, eyelids fluttering. "Just a dad." And then he passed out again. The sun began to dip low, finally retreating behind a range of baked hills. The wind picked up. Selena gathered the girls around the stranger, wrapping them in thermal blankets from the SUV. Her girls, usually so energetic and demanding, now sat solemnly beside him, as if keeping watch. She stroked his dirt-encrusted hair, marveling at how his chest kept rising, how his body still fought even after being pushed so far. This wasn't a man who had anything to spare. And yet, he'd given everything. The sound of engines in the far distance made her jerk her head up. A faint rumble, then a louder one. Headlights glinted on the edge of the horizon, bouncing between dunes. Finally, her security detail. The convoy. She didn't stand. She didn't move. Not yet. She looked down again at the stranger, the man who had dropped from nowhere like a desert angel and saved everything she loved most. And she whispered, "You have no idea what you've done." Later, long after the last rays of light had fled, and the wind cooled to something almost gentle, Miguel stirred once more. The air smelled faintly of lavender and engine grease. He was lying on a cot under a makeshift awning. A small generator hummed nearby. He turned his head and saw her again, the woman in white, sitting in a folding chair beside him. Her arms were wrapped around all three girls, who now slept, tangled together in exhaustion. Their cheeks were clean. They had been fed. They were safe. He tried to speak. His lips cracked open. She looked over, eyes meeting his. "You passed out," she said softly. "I wasn't sure you'd wake up again." He swallowed hard, voice ragged. "You found help?" She nodded. "They're on their way." He smiled weakly. "Good." Then a pause. Her gaze softened. "You didn't know them," she said. "You had no reason. You just jumped." He stared at the canvas roof above. Quiet for a beat. "They were crying," he murmured. "Didn't need a reason." Selena reached for his hand, wrapped it gently in hers. "Well, maybe now you'll let me return the favor." His eyes fluttered shut again, the tension in his face easing as sleep reclaimed him. But something in the silence had changed. Some unspoken thread pulled tight between them, the kind of connection born not from time but from truth. Outside, the growl of engines grew closer. The miracle was on its way, and none of them would ever be the same. Miguel woke to a softness he hadn't felt in years, cotton sheets, cold air from a ceiling vent, and the distant murmur of someone speaking softly into a phone. Light filtered through tall curtains, the kind meant for hotels or rich people's guest rooms. He sat up too quickly, groaning as his back reminded him of the sinkhole and everything it had cost him. A nurse walked in, a real one, not a desert mirage, with scrubs and quiet footsteps. She smiled when she saw he was awake. "You're in good shape, all things considered," she said. "Mild dehydration, bruised ribs, borderline heat stroke, but no internal injuries." Miguel blinked, absorbing the details with sluggish confusion. "Where am I?" "Private medical suite. Property of Ms. Selena Rios." He flinched. "The woman with the girls?" The nurse nodded, then gestured toward the door. "She's waiting to speak with you. Only when you're ready." Miguel leaned back against the pillow, heart pounding now, not from fear, but from something rawer. A man like him didn't land in private suites. He belonged to motels and roadside clinics. Everything about this place, from the air-conditioned chill to the quiet luxury of its walls, told him he was very far from home. He wasn't ready, but she was already at the door. Selena stepped inside, dressed simply in jeans and a linen blouse, her dark hair pulled back in a low twist. She carried none of the desperate heat from the desert or the ragged worry she'd worn like a second skin. Now she looked composed, but not distant. Her eyes softened the moment they landed on him. "You saved my daughters," she said without preamble. "I didn't want to wait to thank you." He opened his mouth, but she raised a hand. "I know you didn't do it for thanks. That's clear, but I couldn't let another hour go by without saying it." "They're okay?" he asked, voice hoarse. She smiled. "Perfectly okay. A little shaken, a little sore, but nothing permanent." Miguel nodded slowly. "Good." She walked to a chair beside his bed and sat carefully, as if she feared disturbing him. "They keep asking when they'll see you again. That surprised him more than anything. Really, they've never stopped talking about you. They keep saying, he just jumped in, mama. He didn't even think twice." He rubbed his face, feeling the sand still caked in his pores despite the hospital cleaning. Didn't feel like a choice. Selena looked at him for a long moment. "And that's exactly why I can't ignore what comes next." He lifted his gaze. "What do you mean?" She drew a breath, as if weighing how much to reveal. "I need help, Miguel." The sound of his name from her mouth caught him off guard. It felt too personal, too familiar, like something she'd earned without asking. She continued, "I'm a single mother, widowed. Their father died 2 years ago. Cancer. He was a good man, an impossible act to follow. Since then, I've thrown everything into protecting them. But I can't be everywhere at once. I run a business, a large one, and lately, I've realized I need someone I can trust around them." Miguel frowned. "You don't even know me. I know what kind of man jumps into a sinkhole for children he's never met. That's more than I know about most people I work with." He didn't know what to say. This wasn't a conversation he expected. He thought she might send him a gift basket or a check. Not this. She saw his discomfort and softened her tone. "I'm not asking you to do anything right now. Rest. Get better. But I wanted you to know there's a place for you here if you want it." Miguel blinked, unsure whether to laugh or cry. "I'm just a mechanic." Anyway, garage closed 6 months ago. Don't even have a place to stay. You don't want me near your kids." "You're wrong," she said quietly. "I think you might be exactly who they need." He didn't say yes. Not right away. He spent 2 more days in the suite, unsure if it was recovery or detention. Each morning, a new tray of food appeared. Eggs, toast, fresh fruit, even coffee better than anything he'd had in years. And each evening, a new knock at his door. A little voice. The first was Emily, the smallest. She held a picture she'd drawn him with cape, lifting her out of a hole full of snakes. He told her there weren't any snakes. She insisted there had been. The second day, Sophia came, the middle triplet. She brought flowers she found on a walk, tucked into a napkin like it was sacred. "For you," she whispered, shy. On the third day, Olivia entered with a question. "Do you know how to fix bikes? Mine keeps losing the chain." He nodded. "I do." She beamed. "Good. Mama says I can show you my workshop." Their visits were short, but he began to look forward to the sound of their feet padding down the hallway. Miguel never thought of himself as a sentimental man, but something about their quiet trust undid him in slow, irreversible ways. On the fourth morning, he found himself fully dressed and waiting before anyone knocked. Selena arrived not long after, this time without any fanfare. Just her and a small tablet in hand. "I want to show you something," she said. He followed her to a different room, an office with large windows and polished oak floors. She pulled up a file and handed him the tablet. "This is who I am," she said. "You should know before you decide anything." The screen showed her name, her company, Rios Holdings, a series of investment arms, real estate ventures, and tech partnerships. Forbes, Business Insider. He scrolled, the zeros on the page multiplying with every swipe. He looked up. "You're rich." She laughed, a dry sound. "That's one way to say it." "Then why me? You could hire a security team, nannies, drivers." "I've done all of that," she replied. "And not one of them would have risked their life for my girls. Not one of them would have looked at those children as something more than a paycheck." He didn't respond. What could he say? Then she handed him a different tablet. A blank screen with just a file name, Trial Residency Agreement. Live on the property. 3 months. No obligations beyond being present. Let them get to know you. Help where you feel comfortable. After that, we reassess. He stared at it. It sounded like charity, even as she'd wrapped it in responsibility. But her eyes told him it was more than that. A gamble, perhaps, but not pity. "I'm not a role model," he muttered. "Neither am I," she replied softly. "That's a prize and more than the offer." He agreed the next day. Quietly, reluctantly. Not because he was convinced, but because he didn't want to leave just yet. Selena assigned him a modest guest house on the far end of her estate, a small stucco building with clean sheets and a working fridge. He found groceries already stocked. There was a bicycle leaning against the back wall, child-size with a busted chain. Olivia's, no doubt. He repaired it that afternoon. The girls swarmed him in the yard later, tugging at his sleeves and arguing over who got to show him their favorite tree. He followed them across sunlit lawns, through a hedge path that led to a shaded grove where they built a fort from rocks and discarded patio cushions. He helped fortify it. For a man who'd lived paycheck to paycheck, who'd raised a boy in a 2-room apartment while working 12-hour shifts, the sudden ease of this place felt like another language. But instead of rejecting it outright, he began to listen, observe, adapt. Selena kept her distance during the day, often on video calls or meetings behind closed doors. But she made time for dinner every evening, always at the same long table with the same linen napkins and rotating menus. Miguel never sat at the head, nor did he try. He sat near the end beside Emily, who always asked him questions with the urgency of someone who feared dreams might slip away. He answered every one. Selena watched, quietly, sometimes smiling when no one else was looking. But not everything was easy. One night, Miguel wandered outside, unable to sleep. He stood under the stars, arms crossed, trying to make sense of how he'd landed here. A voice cut through the darkness. "You okay?" He turned. Selena stood barefoot in the grass, arms wrapped in a shawl. "Fine," he lied. She walked closer. "Too quiet for you?" "Too unreal," he admitted. She nodded, looking up at the stars. "I felt that way, too. After James died, this house felt like a museum of someone else's life." He watched her, saw the glint of something unspoken behind her words. She went on. "My girls don't know how much I failed them. I covered up with structure. Tutors, security. But they need more than that. They need real. I'm not a cure for grief," he said. "No," she agreed. But maybe you're proof that love still exists in places we stop looking. That left him speechless. She walked away after that, not waiting for a reply. And for the first time in years, Miguel felt something stirred deep in his chest. Not debt, not guilt, possibility. 1 week into the residency, Nico called. Miguel hadn't spoken to his son in 3 months. Not since their argument about money, pride, and broken promises. The voicemail was simple. Hey, Dad. Just wanted to check in. I miss you. He didn't cry, but he came close. Selena found him on the porch that night, holding his phone like it was sacred. Family, she asked. He nodded. My son. We had a falling out. She sat beside him, silence stretching like a blanket. You should call him, she said. Miguel looked over. Maybe I will. Selena smiled. Good. He should know what kind of man his father really is. Miguel looked down at his hands, scarred, rough, the hands of a man who had failed and fallen and gotten back up again. Maybe, just maybe, there was still time to build something new. Beside him, Selena's presence felt less like pressure and more like a gentle offer. A woman with her own burdens, her own mistakes, offering space, not answers. And for the first time in a long while, Miguel wanted to try. The morning of the 6th week began with a sound unlike any Miguel had heard in the hills. The deep, steady hum of engines. Not one, not two, a dozen. Low, throaty, synchronized. He stepped outside into the gauzy warmth of the early sun, blinking toward the estate's winding drive. A convoy of SUVs, black, high-gloss, and identical, moved slowly up the hill, their tires kissing the gravel like they belonged to the earth itself. The kind of vehicles made for diplomats or dignitaries, or power. The girls were already at the window, wide-eyed. Selena was not. Miguel found her in the office, standing before the mirror, smoothing the sleeve of her blazer. A rare choice. Most days she wore comfortable clothes and little makeup. But today she was a figure of poise and precision. A woman armoring herself. Expecting company? He asked, not sarcastically, just with quiet curiosity. She glanced at him through the mirror, her reflection composed, but her voice not quite matching. Board members. Investors. They want to assess the situation after a few public leaks. Miguel stepped farther into the room. Leaks about what? She sighed. About the girls. About the sinkhole. About you. He stiffened. Me. Someone on my staff let it slip that a stranger rescued them. The media spun it, of course. Headlines like, Mystery Man Pulls Triplets from Doom. Now they're asking why I didn't have tighter security. Why my daughters were unsupervised. Whether I've lost control. That's ridiculous, he said. She met his eyes, steady. Maybe, but ridiculous can cost billions. Miguel didn't reply. His world didn't have headlines. Or billions. But it did understand blame, and how fast it could fall on the wrong shoulders. She seemed to read the thought in his silence. They'll want to meet you, she said. It's better if you're not caught off guard. I'm not a prop, Selena. No, she said softly. You're the reason they're still alive. He didn't know what to say to that, so he nodded and left the room. They gathered on the veranda, 12 in all, men in tailored suits, women in heels unsuited for gravel. One man with mirrored glasses who didn't remove them even inside. Miguel stood near the back wall, hands in his pockets, not blending but not retreating either. Selena stood at the front, poised, explaining calmly what had happened, how swiftly Miguel had acted, how protocols had already been revised. Her voice didn't shake once. She was good at this. Still, he saw the pressure beneath her smooth exterior, the almost imperceptible clench of her jaw when the silver-haired woman asked, And this man, what's his legal standing here? Miguel felt every eye turned to him like spotlights. Selena didn't miss a beat. He's a contracted guardian, an emergency responder during their play periods. A temporary role under review. It wasn't a lie. Not exactly. But it was enough to make Miguel feel like a hired shadow. The man with the glasses spoke up. We should vet him. Public attention will increase. If someone digs into his past. Selena cut in. I've already run checks. He's clean. Miguel bristled. You ran checks. She hesitated, then nodded. The day after you woke up. I needed to know. He looked away, not angry, but stung. The discussion turned toward liability clauses and insurance premiums, the kind of talk that carved people down into risks and assets. Miguel had spent his life being overlooked. He hadn't expected that being noticed would feel just as hollow. When the meeting adjourned, the group filed past him with polite nods and brief glances, none quite sure what to say. The last woman, a younger executive with a quiet demeanor, paused. I hope you know what you did was extraordinary, she said gently. Not many people would have done what you did. He nodded, grateful, but the words felt like a sticker slapped on a fracture. Later, as the SUVs retreated in a synchronized line back down the hill, Miguel stood alone by the drive, the dust rising behind him like smoke. He realized then how far from his old life he had come, and how precarious his place here truly was. That night at dinner, the girls were quieter than usual. Olivia picked at her rice. Emily laid her head on the table, and Sophia stared at her water glass like it held a secret. Miguel leaned in. What's going on, chicas? Olivia frowned. Are you leaving? His fork paused midair. Why would you think that? We heard Mama talking, Sophia said. They said you don't belong. Miguel set the fork down slowly. Come here. All three scooted closer, folding into him like petals around a stem. People might say a lot of things, he said softly, but none of that changes how I feel about you. I'm not planning to go anywhere. But if they make you, Emily whispered. He looked at Selena. She was watching, unreadable. Miguel turned back to the girls. Then I'll find a way back, no matter what. That seemed to satisfy them, for now. But later, after the girls were tucked in, Miguel lingered in the hallway, listening to the sound of them breathing. They were already part of him in ways he hadn't prepared for. And love, he realized, was not something that waited for permission. It just happened. Selena approached, her voice low. I'm sorry. He didn't turn. I should have told you about the background check, about the investors. You did what you had to, he said. No, I did what I thought would protect them, but I forgot to think how it would make you feel. He turned then. I'm not a danger to them. You know that now. I do, she said, but not everyone sees what I see. Miguel let the silence settle. She moved closer, her expression softer now. Do you want to stay, Miguel? He didn't answer right away. I don't want to be a ghost in their life. Someone they talk about like a storm that passed through. Then don't be, she said. Make a decision. Fight for it. He looked at her. And what about you? Where do you fit into all this? That caught her off guard. She exhaled slowly. I don't know yet, but I'm here. He nodded, letting her words settle in the space between them. It wasn't a promise, but it wasn't nothing. 3 days later, the miracle arrived. It came not in the form of a divine sign or flash of fate, but in something quieter, an envelope. It was delivered by a courier in a navy blazer, handed directly to Miguel at the guest house, embossed with the Rios Holdings seal, sealed with wax. Inside, a formal job offer. Title, Director of Family Operations. Responsibilities, supervision of the girls, logistics management, field operations and security integration. Compensation, 6 figures. Housing included, benefits included, equity included. He read it twice, 3 times, then laughed out loud, not out of humor, but disbelief. Someone like him, who'd once patched tires in the sun and borrowed money to keep the lights on, was being offered a future with zero fine print and real stakes. But it wasn't the money that stunned him. It was the trust. He brought it to Selena. Is this serious? She nodded. Very. And if I say no, then you'll still be part of our lives. Just not in this role. Miguel looked down at the paper, feeling the weight of choice pressing into his chest. I've never had a real title, he said. Maybe it's time, she replied. That night, he didn't sleep. He walked the grounds, past the grove, past the girls' swing set, past the patch of dry grass where he had first arrived, dust-covered and disoriented, dragging 3 tiny bodies from the sun-baked earth. He remembered the moment he had seen their eyes, terrified, trusting, fragile, and how he had acted without thinking, not for glory, not for purpose, because it was what a father does. The offer was more than a job. It was a declaration, a rebirth. He thought of Nico, of the mistakes he'd made, the things he wished he could do over. And now, the strange, improbable chance to be a father again, to make different choices, better ones. By sunrise, he knew what to do. He handed Selena the signed offer in the kitchen, while Emily clung to his leg, and Olivia showed him a puzzle piece she couldn't place. Selena smiled, not triumphantly, just gently. "Thank you," she said. But Miguel didn't say you're welcome. He bent down, helped Olivia finish the puzzle, then lifted Emily onto his shoulders as Sophia clapped. Later that afternoon, he stood in front of a new security team hired to assist. He wore a collared shirt. He spoke with confidence he didn't know he had. He wasn't the same man who'd emerged from the sinkhole. He was something more. And as he watched the girls run toward the swings, Selena laughing at something they shouted, Miguel understood the real question was never what is a life worth. It was how do you measure a life given freely, without hesitation, in the name of love? Because sometimes a miracle doesn't arrive in a motorcade. Sometimes it's the moment you say yes. The first time Miguel held the twins' new baby brother, he forgot to breathe, not out of panic or awe, but because in that single fragile moment, the world stood still. His hands, once calloused from shifting tires and sun-baked tools, now cradled something impossibly light, impossibly alive. The baby yawned, wriggled, and settled into his arm like it had always belonged there. Miguel looked up and found Selena watching him, not as a CEO or client, not even as a mother, but as something far more intimate. "You're a natural," she whispered. Miguel chuckled, shifting the blanket around the baby's cheek. "I had a little practice." It had been almost 3 years since the desert, since the sinkhole, since a half-dead man staggered out of sand carrying 3 tiny lives in his arms. In that time, nothing about their lives had gone back to what was before, because nothing could. The girls had grown like ivy, wild and brilliant, each reaching in her own direction. Olivia devoured books, solved puzzles in minutes, and had recently declared she would become an engineer, so nobody gets stuck ever again. Sophia painted on every surface she was allowed, often humming to herself like the world was her symphony. And Emily, fierce, stubborn, and full of questions, had developed an obsession with first aid kits and wilderness survival guides. They call Miguel Poppy now, not because anyone told them to, because somewhere along the way, he became one. Selena had never asked for that arrangement, but she never stopped it, either. In the early months, they kept things labeled roles, boundaries, rooms. But grief and gratitude have a way of folding people together, and somewhere between school pickups and midnight fevers and story-time cuddles, the space is blurred. It hadn't been love at first sight between him and Selena. It had been slower, stranger, a current under the surface, growing steadier with time. She was hard to know at first, always thinking 2 steps ahead, keeping her cards close. But when she let him in, it wasn't in pieces. It was wholehearted, fierce, quietly loyal. He'd never met a woman who could command a boardroom one moment and kneel in the dirt to dig worms with her daughters the next. Still, she never leaned on him easily. Her independence wasn't pride. It was survival. It wasn't until the night her mother died, 2 months before the baby came, that she let herself fall apart in his arms. No grand speeches. No declarations. Just her fingers curled into his shirt and the simple sentence, "Don't leave." He didn't. The estate had changed, too. Not drastically, but with intent. The garden was fuller now, teeming with herbs and vegetables the girls helped plant each spring. There was a second swing set, a zip line, and a greenhouse Selena had funded not for prestige, but for healing. Hers, theirs, his. They'd taken one family trip to the coast, where the girls saw the ocean for the first time, and Miguel watched Selena walk barefoot in the surf, laughing like someone unburdened. It was the first time he realized she could laugh like that, and maybe the first time she realized it, too. But not everything was perfect. Life never promised that. Selena still worked 12-hour days. Miguel still wrestled with the ghost of a son he'd lost long ago. And though they shared a home, they hadn't yet defined what they were to each other. No rings, no promises spoken aloud. But in every small moment, packed lunches, whispered reassurances, bedtime routines, they built something steady, something sacred. Then came the unexpected pregnancy. Selena had told him on a quiet Thursday, standing by the coffee pot like it was any other day. "I'm pregnant," she said simply, not with fear but with steady breath. He blinked, stunned. "You're sure?" She nodded. "I've known for a few days. I just want to be sure of how I felt before I told you." He waited. "I'm happy," she said, voice trembling with more emotion than her words allowed. "Scared, yes, but happy." He had stepped forward then, touched her face. "So am I." They hadn't planned it. They hadn't even talked about a future that extended that far. But somehow, when the world shifted again, they didn't splinter. The first time Miguel held the twins' new baby brother, he forgot to breathe, not out of panic or awe, but because in that single fragile moment, the world stood still. His hands, once calloused from shifting tires and sun-baked tools, now cradled something impossibly light, impossibly alive. The baby yawned, wriggled, and settled into his arm like it had always belonged there. Miguel looked up and found Selena watching him, not as a CEO or client, not even as a mother, but as something far more intimate. "You're a natural," she whispered. Miguel chuckled, shifting the blanket around the baby's cheek. "I had a little practice." It had been almost 3 years since the desert, since the sinkhole, since a half-dead man staggered out of sand carrying 3 tiny lives in his arms. In that time, nothing about their lives had gone back to what was before, because nothing could. The girls had grown like ivy, wild and brilliant, each reaching in her own direction. Olivia devoured books, solved puzzles in minutes, and had recently declared she would become an engineer, so nobody gets stuck ever again. Sophia painted on every surface she was allowed, often humming to herself like the world was her symphony. And Emily, fierce, stubborn, and full of questions, had developed an obsession with first aid kits and wilderness survival guides. They called Miguel Poppy now, not because anyone told them to, because somewhere along the way, he became one. Selena had never asked for that arrangement, but she never stopped it, either. In the early months, they kept things labeled roles, boundaries, rooms. But grief and gratitude have a way of folding people together, and somewhere between school pickups and midnight fevers and story-time cuddles, the space is blurred. It hadn't been love at first sight between him and Selena. It had been slower, stranger, a current under the surface, growing steadier with time. She was hard to know at first, always thinking 2 steps ahead, keeping her cards close. But when she let him in, it wasn't in pieces. It was wholehearted, fierce, quietly loyal. He'd never met a woman who could command a boardroom one moment and kneel in the dirt to dig worms with her daughters the next. Still, she never leaned on him easily. Her independence wasn't pride. It was survival. It wasn't until the night her mother died, 2 months before the baby came, that she let herself fall apart in his arms. No grand speeches. No declarations. Just her fingers curled into his shirt and the simple sentence, "Don't leave." He didn't. The estate had changed, too. Not drastically, but with intent. The garden was fuller now, teeming with herbs and vegetables the girls helped plant each spring. There was a second swing set, a zip line, and a greenhouse Selena had funded not for prestige, but for healing. Hers, theirs, his. They'd taken one family trip to the coast, where the girls saw the ocean for the first time, and Miguel watched Selena walk barefoot in the surf, laughing like someone unburdened. It was the first time he realized she could laugh like that, and maybe the first time she realized it, too. But not everything was perfect. Life never promised that. Selena still worked 12-hour days. Miguel still wrestled with the ghost of a son he'd lost long ago. And though they shared a home, they hadn't yet defined what they were to each other. No rings, no promises spoken aloud. But in every small moment, packed lunches, whispered reassurances, bedtime routines, they built something steady, something sacred. Then came the unexpected pregnancy. Selena had told him on a quiet Thursday, standing by the coffee pot like it was any other day. "I'm pregnant," she said simply, not with fear but with steady breath. He blinked, stunned. "You're sure?" She nodded. "I've known for a few days. I just want to be sure of how I felt before I told you." He waited. "I'm happy," she said, voice trembling with more emotion than her words allowed. "Scared, yes, but happy." He had stepped forward then, touched her face. "So am I." They hadn't planned it. They hadn't even talked about a future that extended that far. But somehow, when the world shifted again, they didn't splinter.